Dubai, the most modern city in the third world, was created by one man, His Highness Sheikh Rashid Al Maktoum, the builder of Dubai. His Highness Sheikh Rashid Al Maktoum succeeded his father, Sheikh Saeed bin Maktoum, in 1958. Sheikh Rashid had assisted his father in government for many years and knew well what he wanted for his people. Through the bitter years of the Second World War, hunger and poverty had stalked the streets of Dubai. Sheikh Rashid wanted to banish this memory with the permanent prosperity of a modern economy. None of the 20,000 people living in Dubai in 1958 could have imagined the extent of their new ruler's vision. Dubawi are born traders. Their reputation as Gulf traders has been chronicled for hundreds of years. But Sheikh Rashid's vision was for Dubai to become more than just a local trading port, but to become a world trading port. Dubai had known prosperity in the past. Before the Japanese invented the cultured pearl in the 1930s, Dubai had been a major source of pearls for the world. In 1907, there were over 400 pearl dhows with 6,000 divers and crew operating out of Dubai Creek. Dubai has always been a city of sailors, fishermen and men who traded by the sea, and men who built the boats that carried that trade. When Sheikh Rashid came to power, he knew that Dubai's future depended on these ancient skills. The sea is and always was the lifeblood of Dubai. Its abundance sustained the city-state in an arid, barren land. For thousands of years, the men of Dubai have dived for pearls. The pearls are the rich gardens of the Gulf warm seas. Through the last century, and for the first 30 years of this, the demands of rich ladies in Europe far outstripped the supply. Dubai flourished. For 2 seasons, totaling nearly 6 months every year, the 400 dhows of Dubai's pearl fleets would comb the pearl banks of the Gulf, Sri Lanka, Socotra, and even the Red Sea. To support the pearl fleet and market its treasure, there grew up a complex and sophisticated business community. Boats had to be financed and supplied at sea, and, most important, Dubai traders bought the pearls and travelled to India, to Egypt, to the Orient. They learnt the languages of commerce, and they brought gold and trading goods back to Dubai. Pearls, the hard-won treasure of the sea, made Dubai a city of merchants. But the city itself, the pearl fleets, and even the traders could not have existed without the safe haven of Dubai's creek. The shallow shores and the sudden shamals that drive unwary captains and their cargoes onto the beaches have always made the Gulf difficult for traders and sailors. But in the 1950s, Dubai's very existence seemed doomed. The creek was silting up. Growing coral reefs had altered the offshore currents. Silt, carried from south to north along Dubai's beaches, was slowly closing the mouth of the creek. In 1955, it was no longer deep enough for the larger dhows to enter. Even cargo lighters had to wait to come in at high tide. From the beginning, Sheikh Rashid's motto was, "Bring the big ships in." Many experts told him to build jetties out to the deep water and forget the creek. But the scheme Sheikh Rashid liked was to use the power of the daily tide to keep the creek free of silt. Bringing the big ships in was going to cost £500,000. Sheikh Rashid needed to increase trade to finance the improvements to the city. With the formation of the municipality, roads were being built for the first time. Inland, vast reserves of sweet water were discovered deep underground. Sheikh Rashid ordered that pipelines should bring fresh water into the city. For the sick and injured, there was the new Maktoum hospital. Sheikh Rashid ordered the dredging of the creek to begin. To pay for it, he sold creek bonds to local merchants and negotiated a generous loan from Kuwait. The first part of the scheme was to enable the cargo lighters to enter the creek at any tide. No longer would they be driven ashore while waiting for high tide. The second part of the scheme would enable steel-hulled coasters of up to 500 tons to enter the creek. This would make Dubai the major port of the southern Gulf and the natural trading and service centre for the oil boom that everyone knew was coming. The scheme was to deepen and narrow the entrance of the creek and to deepen it inland too, so that at high tide there would be enough water within the creek to scour out the silt as it flowed out with the falling tide. As a byproduct of the dredging project, there would be millions of tons of rock, coral and silt from the creek bed. This was to be used for the second part of Sheikh Rashid's grand plan, to reclaim from the sea the land he needed to build a modern city. Some of the new land was to sell for 1,000 times the cost of its reclamation. Sheikh Rashid's business sense became legendary. The whole dredging and reclamation scheme was to take years for the full scale of Sheikh Rashid's vision to become reality, a city fit for the next century. No outsider, no foreigner, no expatriate worker can sense the importance of the creek and marine trade to the people of Dubai. From father to son and on to his son, the tradition of trading is in the very blood of Dubai. And when Sheikh Rashid said, "Bring the ships in," no one had to be told why. In 1963, after 4 years of dredging, the first of the big ships tied up to unload its cargo in full view of Sheikh Rashid's office in the customs house. In 1951, just 2,000 tons of goods were landed in Dubai. By 1963, it had reached nearly 20,000 tons. Essential to Sheikh Rashid's success was money management. He started with a monthly customs income of just 200,000 rupees. As it increased, he would use the money to finance development loans from the bank. For every 50,000 rupees increase at the customs, he would borrow 5 million rupees for a new project. Oil had already been discovered in Bahrain, Qatar and Abu Dhabi, and the prospects looked good in Dubai. In 1962, a new oil company, Continental, spudded in its first exploration wells. But Sheikh Rashid planned nothing on the assumption that Dubai would get oil. If there was no oil, the development would merely take longer, he said. Imperial Airways flying boats had used the creek on their way to India in the 1930s. And in the 60s, Sheikh Rashid saw Dubai's potential as one of the world's most important transit airports. Sheikh Rashid himself soon became a seasoned international traveller. On a visit to London in 1959, he and the young Sheikh Maktoum were given a guided tour of the city. Dubai was still a British protectorate, and the British controlled Dubai's foreign relations and defence. Sheikh Rashid foresaw the challenge of independence on the horizon, but he knew Dubai could not stand alone. When he met Harold Macmillan, then Britain's Prime Minister, he knew the peoples of the Emirates must come together to be able to stand alone in the... Back in Dubai, the ruler was laying the building blocks of a state for businessmen. He saw that the job of government is not to interfere. The essentials, like electricity, elsewhere a state enterprise, were in Dubai in the hands of private enterprise. The next great step forward was the completion of the Maktoum Bridge in 1963. Before that, cars and trucks had taken more than an hour to get from one side of the creek to the other. November 1966, and the groundwork for eventual federation is laid at the crucial council meeting in Dubai. The first step, a common development fund, and with that money a first link, a modern road linking Dubai and Sharjah, opened on November the 16th, 1966. The essential quality of Dubai is freedom, freedom to buy and sell, no formality and no fuss, to find customers for goods and goods for customers. The only red tape Sheikh Rashid insisted upon was that everything must be landed at the customs house beneath his office and the dues paid before the goods went on the market or were re-exported. Sheikh Rashid worked from a modest businessman's office. He ruled with humour and humanity and a deep sense of purpose. The hours he worked were those of a Bedouin or a sailor, the hours between sunrise and sunset. He rose with his morning prayers and did not rest until long after dark. He was accessible to anyone at any time, be he head of state, a businessman, or a simple Bedouin. The most important room in Dubai was Sheikh Rashid's old majlis. Here, with the windows overlooking the trade in the creek and the customs wharves, Sheikh Rashid will take his coffee and receive the people of Dubai. Sheikh Rashid ruled and administered by word of mouth and by consensus rather than decree. In the Majlis, he discussed his projects with the people, but most important, he wanted information. How is business? How are the merchants doing? He made few notes. He seemed to be able to remember everything. When he started the creek project, he said to his advisors, open the creek, bring in the business, and encourage the merchants. But by the mid-60s, business was outgrowing the capacity of the creek to handle it. Offshore, big freighters were waiting months to offload their cargo. Sheikh Rashid knew that if Dubai was to stay ahead, it must have a port for ocean-going vessels. The need was made even more urgent when Dubai herself struck oil offshore in 1966. A modern port had been in Sheikh Rashid's mind for years. Some suggested that the creek should be dredged deep enough for ocean ships and a few cargo wharves built. He knew that would never be enough to satisfy his plans for Dubai. In October 1967, Sheikh Rashid began his biggest project yet, the construction of a major international port, Port Rashid. The initial contract was for just 4 berths. Sheikh Rashid wanted more, but was held back by the caution of his advisors. So he insisted that the port should be designed from the beginning for expansion. Only Sheikh Rashid knew that when the first bulldozers went into action in 1968, Port Rashid would one day have not 4, but 36 berths. Almost daily, the Sheikh would drive out to the port site soon after dawn to check upon the progress. Now, with Dubai's business enterprise underwritten by the certainty of oil, Sheikh Rashid was impatient to bring the really big ships in. Every cargo ship that passed by was lost business to Dubai. With ships queuing to offload their cargo throughout the Gulf, Dubai had to win the race with her first deep-water port to stay ahead as the Gulf's #1 trading city. The contractor's first headache was where to find the millions of tons of rock needed to create 5 kilometers of breakwater. Sheikh Rashid solved their problem. He remembered a spot 30 kilometers inland where years before they had tried to dig a well and had struck solid rock. And to carry the rock to the sea, a new road. By the time the project was finished, the trucks had clocked up 11 million kilometers. The 30 kilometers of road needed to bring the rock to Port Rashid project spurred on Sheikh Rashid's plan to open the entire emirate with modern roads. Without a network of highways, it would be impossible for Sheikh Rashid to bring the benefits of modern medicine, education and agriculture to all the people of Dubai. Inland, the tribal people of Dubai were still living as they had done for centuries. A visit to the growing city of Dubai might take days of trekking across the desert. But news spreads even across the desert sands, and in 1968 the campfire talk was increasingly about independence and federation. In Abu Dhabi in July 1968, the rulers of 9 Gulf Emirates met to discuss a possible federation that would seek independence from Britain. 3 months later, they met again in Doha. It was the 4th meeting of the rulers in less than a year. When Sheikh Rashid went to London on an official visit in 1969, Prime Minister Harold Wilson had already announced that Britain's armed forces would be pulling out of the Gulf in 1971. Sheikh Rashid knew that the need for the Gulf leaders to unite in a federal state was now becoming urgent. In Dubai itself, the pace of development was becoming frantic. The population had reached the 70,000 mark, and Dubai was about to become a major oil exporter. Development of the offshore fields discovered in 1966 was nearly complete. But how to bring in the supertankers? Dubai's coastline is too shallow for oil to be stored on land and pumped to tankers waiting offshore. A unique solution to the problem was devised: khazans, vast underwater storage tanks that would store crude oil right beside the offshore wells. Early in 1969, Sheikh Rashid came to watch the launch of the first of the khazans, which had been built on the beach in Jumeirah from 10,000 tons of concrete and 5,000 tons of steel. Each tank was assembled in a giant hole in the sand, and then, when it was finished, towed out to sea through a channel bulldozed through the beach. The tanks were so big, 180 feet high, and inside room enough for a football pitch, that great ocean-going tugs had to be brought out from Europe to tow them out to Dubai's new Wahda offshore field. Once they had been carefully positioned, each khazan was flooded and sunk. The tanks had no bottom. They were intended to fill with seawater. As oil was pumped in from the top, so it would force water out the bottom. Oil floats on water and would not mix. As tankers drew off the stored oil from the top of the khazan, seawater would flow back in and fill the space the oil left behind. Later, Later that same year, the first supertanker loaded with Dubai crude. With the guaranteed revenues from oil to add to Dubai's now booming trading business, Sheikh Rashid's foresight was now evident. No one could question his judgment. But Sheikh Rashid knew that only the first foundations had been laid, and that the real development work still lay ahead. For the moment, everything was held up for the lack of a deep-water port. But just a year after the first shipment of oil left Dubai, the first ocean-going ship docked here. In November 1970, the passenger ship Sardana tied up at the first wharf to be completed in Port Rashid. It was just 3 years since the contract for the first 4 berths had been signed, and since then the project had been expanded to 15. At last, the heavy equipment and goods that Dubai needed could be brought in easily and cheaply. Within the city itself, life was being transformed. Cheap and plentiful electric power meant light and air conditioning for all. Now business did not stop when the sun went down, it just kept on booming. But as 1970 drew to a close, the people of Dubai and their ruler were impatient to march onward to federation and nationhood. On the 2nd of December 1971, at the Guest Palace in Dubai, the rulers of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Ajman, Fujairah and Al Ghurair declared the independent sovereign state of the United Arab Emirates. The 7th, Ras Al Khaimah, was to be welcomed to the federation a year later. At the ceremony, His Highness Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan, the ruler of Abu Dhabi, was appointed to be president, and His Highness Sheikh Rashid Al Maktoum, the deputy president and prime minister of the new country. Later that day, the President Sheikh Zayed signed a treaty of friendship between the UAE and Great Britain. The individual Emirates had terminated their protection treaties with Britain the day before. The 2nd of December, a new flag flew. It has since become famous and respected throughout the world, both in the cause of the Arab nation and in the cause of freedom and peace. As the flag of a new nation was raised, so the Union Jack was finally lowered, and with it, the end to Britain's once mighty Indian Ocean Empire. The constitution, drawn up in 1971, has remained unaltered to this day. The Supreme Council, made up of the rulers of the 7 Emirates, is the highest authority. All laws and decrees of the Union are ratified by the Council. Serving the Council are the President, the Council of Ministers, the National Assembly, and the Judiciary. For Sheikh Rashid, the creation of the UAE ensured a secure future for the people and the city of Dubai. Within months of the formation of the UAE, the first stage of Port Rashid was completed. It gave the new country its first deep-water port. Freight from every corner of the globe arrived in Dubai to be transshipped, bought, sold and re-exported throughout the Gulf. Without the foresight of Sheikh Rashid, the vital early development of the UAE would have been strangled. Sheikh Rashid was now free to make his vision become reality. The only limit was the capacity of those around him to match his energy and his amazing command of detail. Rashid controlled everything, they said. No one could keep up with him. Every morning with the sunrise, Sheikh Rashid drove round the project sites. Nothing was too small, and woe betide any manager who could not give convincing reasons for any delays. With Port Rashid open, the airport boomed too. Sheikh Rashid had the runways lengthened, and in Dubai itself, he decided to have the 2 sides of the creek linked at the seaward end with a tunnel. But he saw that a modern city was more than roads, harbours and heavy industry. It must express itself internationally and entertain and inform its people. It needs libraries, newspapers, radio and, most important today, television. In 1974, the top was sliced off a mountain near Wahda for a giant new radio and television transmitter. No man had set his foot on this peak before. It could be reached only by eagles and helicopters. Later that same year, His Highness opened the first colour television service in the Gulf, Dubai TV. Immediately, 1 million eyes were drawn to Dubai as colour television was beamed out over the waters of the Gulf. The next year, 1979, the Earth Station opened in Jebel Ali, opening the ears and eyes of Dubai to the world and the world to Dubai. Locked onto geostationary satellites east and west, Dubai and the UAE had telephone and television communication with all the great cities of the world. Nightly, the news of that day throughout the world came to Dubai's TV screens. But Sheikh Rashid also wanted to create a state that was a green garden amid the great deserts of Arabia. First, he turned to Wahda, Dubai's green jewel in the mountains, a jewel created by the gift of water. But Wahda was to be more than a green garden. Dubai's population had increased fivefold and would double again through the decade. Wahda had to become Dubai's market garden. A garden fed from water trapped deep underground for millions of years. Unlocking that water gave Sheikh Rashid pleasure that only a desert dweller could understand. From now on, the people of Dubai would never know the harsh life of Sheikh Rashid's youth, when men had to dig for water with their bare hands, to spend days without seeing a green leaf. With irrigation came a social revolution. All the people of Dubai could seek a settled life with education for their children and medical care for their families. And to bring the big city to the mountains of Wahda and the produce of Wahda's gardens to Dubai, a new highway was begun in 1975. Dubai itself was becoming a modern Venice, the Venice of the oil business. But Sheikh Rashid saw beyond the oil and construction boom. He must provide a catalyst for the businesses that would support a mature state into the next century. In 1975, work started on the trade centre. It was an amazing leap into the future, a 40-story building when, just 10 years before, there had been nothing over 2 stories in Dubai. Why build up? We've got plenty of land, people said. But whatever the cost, Sheikh Rashid wanted a building that would illustrate Dubai's spirit. A tower to symbolize Dubai's outwardness and a nucleus for the businesses yet to come. With the infrastructure developing fast, Sheikh Rashid established separate departments to carry responsibility for managing the economy, education, healthcare, social services, planning and information services. He set up a board to run Dubai municipality and to follow up his designs for the future. To organize and protect the commercial and industrial interests of the emirate, Sheikh Rashid ordered the creation of the Dubai Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Sheikh Rashid was building a city that could expand for 50 years. In 1975, too, the new tunnel opened for traffic. And the second span of the Maktoum Bridge. Further up the creek, work started on the Ghurair bridge. At the time, some thought it a white elephant. We're too small to have traffic problems, they said. But Sheikh Rashid's master plan was always 10, some said 20 years ahead of those around him. The little mud, stone and barasti city of Sheikh Rashid's first days in power had almost disappeared amid a green and concrete modern city. In Dira, the Chamber of Commerce, the symbol of Dubai's merchants, was being expanded to meet the needs of the booming economy. And to accommodate the oilmen, trade delegations, salesmen and technical people who arrived daily in Dubai, the first modern luxury hotel, the Intercontinental. And for all who came to Dubai and for all who lived in Dubai, free medical care in the new Sheikh Rashid Hospital, equipped to be simply the best. And for the new citizens of the new Dubai, free education for all in new schools built throughout the emirate by the Federal Ministry of Education with the daily encouragement and support of His Highness Sheikh Rashid, who saw the young as his greatest asset. Came to power, there were no government schools in Dubai, and illiteracy condemned many to manual labor, incapable of handling the new technologies. But now there were 55 government and 31 private schools. Within the municipality alone, 27,000 children went to school, more than the entire population of Dubai in 1958. Sheikh Rashid inaugurates another project, the Sheraton Hotel. Around Sheikh Rashid, business multiplied over and over again. Many became rich beyond their dreams, but he was the architect of their wealth. He created a unique environment of business freedom. No red tape in this city. The ruler asked the businessman, "How can I help you?" In 1976, and the next giant leap in Sheikh Rashid's master plan was about to stun the world. From the beginning, he saw Dubai in world terms, to become one of the world's great ports. So in 1976, he set out to build a new port to rival New York and Rotterdam. Jebel Ali. Early that year, His Highness Sheikh Rashid, with Sheikh Hamdan, UAE Minister of Finance, and Sheikh Maktoum, his heir, signed a contract for a 64-berth port to be built in just 4 years. The experts said it would take years just to find the site. Sheikh Rashid stuck his stick in the sand at Jebel Ali and said, "Build it here." In August 1976, their Highnesses Sheikh Rashid and Sheikh Zayed officially inaugurated the new project. The size of the undertaking was almost unimaginable to make a port big enough to be seen from outer space. And Jebel Ali was to be more than just a port. One day, Sheikh Rashid believed it would be a new city based on Dubai's abundant energy and trading with the world. So, from the beginning, around the frame of Jebel Ali, industry. First, a giant new power station, and Dubai, the most modern aluminium smelter in the world. Jebel Ali, man had started to change the very face of the earth. 120 million cubic feet of sand and rock had to be removed to make 2 giant harbour basins, one 11.5 meters deep. A 22-kilometre channel was to be dredged out to sea to bring the big ships into the desert itself. Now Sheikh Rashid was adding a 60-kilometre round trip out to Jebel Ali to his almost daily inspection tours of Dubai's projects. To build the giant jetty walls, the architects adopted an ancient Roman system of great concrete blocks keyed together. And in London, architects, engineers and computers were drawing up another of Sheikh Rashid's master plans, a dry dock to match the scale of Jebel Ali and Port Rashid. An empty beach beside Port Rashid was to become the largest dry dock complex in the world. First, 4 million tons of rock from the quarry found by Sheikh Rashid to build the outer breakwaters that would protect the project from the winter storms. As cranes worked out from the beach, bottom-dumped barges laid the foundations in deep water. The dock itself was to be built with vast concrete boxes, each weighing 3,000 tons, called caissons. In all, 162 had to be cast on land and then floated into position. Of the first caisson was a major event for Sheikh Rashid. Within weeks of the first launch, 2 caissons were being launched each week, lowered gently into the sea and towed to their place in the dock wall, then sunk. Once in position, each caisson was filled with sand and topped off with concrete a metre deep. Within the docks, the dredgers went 11.5 meters below the low water mark. The floor of the dock was to be capped with 1.5 meters of concrete, strong enough to hold a 1 million-ton tanker. The simultaneous development of Jebel Ali port and the dry dock put Port Rashid under tremendous pressure. Yet, thanks to Sheikh Rashid's foresight in ordering 11 more berths in 1969, Port Rashid remained the only port in the Gulf that could turn a ship round in 4 days. Offshore, Dubai Petroleum Company, a partnership between the Dubai government and Continental Oil of America, now had 4 fields in production: Fatah, Southwest Fatah, Rashid and Falah. And beneath the Rashid field, a large reservoir of natural gas had been discovered. Dubai's aggressive open skies policy was rapidly pushing Dubai Airport into a leading position in the Gulf. By the late 70s, Dubai was handling nearly 2 million passengers a year. The airport was now equipped to handle over 1,000 passengers at one time, the same as 3 jumbos landing together. "100 kilometers inland, the mountain oasis of Hatta was being transformed. Sheikh Rashid knew that to ensure Hatta's future, it needed a settled and stable community. He demonstrated his own confidence by building, with his own money, a major new palace. To make modern farming possible, fields were cleared in the wadi floor and linked to a new irrigation system that now tapped the water trapped deep underground during the last ice age, 15,000 years ago. He authorized the building of 2,000 new houses, a power station, schools and a clinic. And to attract the city dwellers of Dubai and international tourists, the Hatta Fort Hotel. Linking Hatta and Dubai, a 100-kilometer highway now carried millions of tons of crushed rock from Hatta's quarries, vital for the dry dock project and the accelerating pace of Sheikh Rashid's plans. As the 1970s drew to a close, Sheikh Rashid's grand design began to emerge from the scaffolding. Seldom has man sculpted the Earth's surface to such purpose. Dubai, a harmony of concrete, steel and marble, a brand new city of merchants. A green city with modern hotels and leisure facilities. The final year of the decade, 1979, and Dubai aluminium swings into full production, producing the purest aluminium in the world. And 45 million gallons of sweet water a day from the sea. Sweet water to bring life to an arid land. June 1979, Sheikh Rashid went to see the first ship enter Jebel Ali port. Through the last 24 months of the project, new berths were open to shipping whilst construction went on behind sand barriers to keep the sea out. Keeping the whole project in phase while the port itself was in use became a nightmare of planning. One section of quay that needed daily access from 1979 was the bulk alumina terminal serving Dubai aluminium. And across the basin from the Dubai quay, the new container terminal. Now Dubai was the Gulf's major container handler. Weekly, thousands were landed for transshipment to Oman, Saudi Arabia and the rest of the UAE. Out at sea, a specially designed dredger on jack-up legs completed the 22-kilometer deep-water approach channel. In all, 65,000 45-ton concrete blocks were needed for the jetty walls, 1,000 tons of cement each day. In sight of the city itself, Dubai Dry Dock was nearly finished. Its 3 gates, one 100 meters long, had been reassembled from parts fabricated in Europe. And on the dock side, two of the largest cranes in the world were being bolted together. The jibs alone weighed 120 tons. Each crane had a reach of 65 meters and could lift 120 tons. The final stage of the project was flooding and removing the copper dams that protected the dock gates while they were being assembled. To test the gates, the docks had to be flooded for the first time. The first opening of the gates was the final moment of achievement for the 6,000 people who'd worked on the project. Each of the 800-ton gates was lowered without a hitch into its own trench in the sea floor. Dubai joined the big league in the ship repair business. Only South Korea and Portugal have docks even near this size. February 1979, the dry dock is finished just 5 years after Sheikh Rashid signed the contract. Its main dock, big enough for 5 football pitches, dwarfs anything afloat. The 19th of May 1979, to complete a decade of triumph for Sheikh Rashid, Queen Elizabeth of Great Britain arrives at the new port of Jebel Ali in the yacht Britannia. The two rulers met to mark Dubai's final transformation into a major commercial and industrial power. First, they officially opened Port Jebel Ali. At Dubai Dry Dock, the public in their thousands came to see the Queen and His Highness Sheikh Rashid declare the dock to be officially open for business. Next, the motorcade took the rulers to Sheikh Rashid's proud new symbol of Dubai, the International Trade Center. The plaque unveiled that day would watch Dubai mature into the 80s. Soaring above the waterfront city, this tower would proclaim Dubai's presence deep into the desert and far out to sea. It would be a magnet for trade, for enterprise, the lifeblood of Dubai. The dawning of the 80s, and Dubai could look forward to a decade of peace and prosperity. At Jebel Ali, the desert had been nearly tamed. One basin was finally flooded, and the remaining quays topped off. The early cool months of 1980, the unfinished inner basin was dredged down to 14.5 meters, while the walls were finished behind protective sand dams. Throughout the project, the truck drivers had to deliver 75,000 tons of rock a week to keep up with Sheikh Rashid's schedule. But in April 1980, they were finished, and the second inner basin was waiting to be flooded. It had to be done with siphons and pumps, because to have breached the sand barrier would have released enough water to cause a major disaster. In the 43 months since the first dredger began its way inland from the beach, Sheikh Rashid had created a port the size of New York Harbor in an empty desert. This is the largest harbor made by man, a port without limits. Jebel Ali has the space to grow, and Dubai has the determination and business acumen to make it grow. beginning of the 80s brought an era of conservation. When Sheikh Rashid inaugurated Dugas, another successful partnership with foreign expertise, he stopped the wasteful flaring off of gas from Dubai. Offshore and inland at Margam, sufficient gas had been discovered to give Dubai enough energy for almost unlimited development through the next century. In 1980, after a quarter of a century, Sheikh Rashid saw that his dream had become reality. No citizen of Dubai would ever know poverty. No enterprise would be frustrated by lack of opportunity. Sheikh Rashid's grand design had been achieved.